see what some of these elements are. Okay, some big crashing industrial metal percussion and tom loops. That's actually Banging on Buckets. It's an old recording, but as I was fishing through stuff in Ableton, I came across this folder of stuff that I had done years ago, cut up samples together and shrunk them down into little 1 and 2 bar loops, and one of them was called Bucket Loop, and I was like, I'll take that. That sounds perfect. And it kind of sounds like Banging on Buckets, you know. As the cue goes on, I wanted the tension and energy level to get more and more intense. So I did a thing in Ableton. You can automate parameters within a clip. So I took this little 2 bar thing, stretched, made it loop, and then used the per clip automation in Ableton to cause its pitch to gradually rise. So you'll notice at the beginning, it's at this pitch. And at the end, it's at a higher pitch.
So slow transposing.
Exactly. It's as though you're slowly moving the pitch bend wheel. It stays in rhythmic time though, but it's gradually getting higher and higher in pitch.
It just makes it more tense.
Exactly. It's just getting worse and worse and worse until the end. And I did that across a few different tracks. You know, some of the other drum elements is just an industrial noise blast that I use as sort of a snare drum halfway through. These little molecules, which are severely edited and chopped up, it's just like a little tiny snippet of an industrial sound that's been chopped up and put back together again into a rhythmic loop. Same with that, that's just a tiny little sound, and I just had it repeat. Other sounds, a very distorted and reverby kick drum. And you add all those things together, and it creates an actual sort of drum track. And then as it goes on, other elements come in one at a time. As that one Banging on a Bucket loop is slowly rising in pitch. Now the kick drum has come in, pounding. Some of those industrial toms are thumping away in the background. That white noise snare. Then the other elements that are helping to add rhythm and add build to that is this weird little sound. It's just one. It almost sounds like it's breathing. It's kind of a distort. It's actually bass guitar. It's just a very short loop of that, and I'm automating the filter in Ableton using their auto filter plugin and just automating the cutoff of that so that it comes down and goes up as the cue progresses. Other elements, it's another little snippet. I don't even know where that's from. I think that's from an ancient sample CD called A Poke in the Ear with a Sharp Stick. Have these kind of distorted drum hits with granular time stretch to give them that pitched element. These are all guitars I recorded and played as best I could. We have these giant chugs.
Whoa.
And those are sort of bending pitch with the whammy pedal or sometimes just bending the strings. And then there's a bit of Logic bit crusher on them to give them that kind of harsh digital edge. And
that's insane.
Some really dirty chugs. And then this tiny little answering guitar that sounds like it's coming through a telephone. So when all that stuff gets going, it's a good cacophony. then a little after that little section, I have a long chunk of guitar that I use that same trick in Ableton to gently and gradually bend the pitch upwards. And it just keeps going up and up and up.
By the end, is it an octave? Or
Yeah, exactly. And then it holds for a second, and then that section's over. And I use that again towards the end of the cue with a slightly different rate of bend, but same kind of trick. In the middle there was an actual synthesizer section, which I almost never do, but I did have it. Despite this wall of keyboards, these are both software synths. There's two sounds that work together. One is from the excellent Zebra synth from Yuhi.
Yeah.
And I have the Zebra 2 HZ version, which is the Hans Zimmer's custom version. This was a sound that I made, but using some of the HZ features in Zebra HZ. So there's two layers to this. This kind of dirty, dark sound, and then another synth sound from the synth that I use more than any others, and I should be embarrassed, but I'm not. It's ES2, the free factory synth that comes with Logic, the one that's been there for and to my ears, that sounds great. It's huge, it sounds wide in stereo, it's aggressive, it's got good bottom end, and when I blend that with that dirty synth from Zebra, we wind up with this. And you just hear Zebra poking out in between the gaps of the other. This cue goes from quiet, weird, spooky stuff to big poundy industrial stuff. It's kind of the traditional end of the movie cue. In the first movie it was called Hello Zepp, and that's kind of become the name of this piece of music. And it always occurs at the end of a Saw movie when the sort of voiceover montage begins and all the flashbacks and really explains what the heck we just watched. And this, when I did the first version of this, I basically wrote the music in the space of 3 hours, then arranged it as a string quartet with 4 monophonic parts, cello, viola, violin 1, violin 2, and then recorded a real string quartet the next day and finished it. It was right at the end of the movie and we were on a tight deadline, and I did it very, very quickly. The original theory behind this piece of music was that in the first Saw movie, the whole movie is dark and murky, and I wanted the whole score to sound like it had its back turned to the audience. And then when we get to that point in the movie, when this music starts, I wanted it to sound like the music had turned around to face you, and it's all bright and short, and there's not a lot of reverb, and things are very pointy and in your face. And so that's why I used like a live string quartet and a lot of sounds that don't occur anywhere else in the movie. With each version of the Saw franchise, this piece of music would get bigger and bigger and longer and have more and more new sections added. This one from Jigsaw, which is the 8th Saw movie, I don't think it's actually the longest one, but I think there have been other movies in the franchise where this cue was as much as 8 minutes long. it always starts the same way with this little hammered dulcimer part, and then strings kind of come in little by little. So the very first thing you hear is this. That little jangly part. And then the sort of much more conventional orchestral stuff kicks in. We work our way through a few sections of that with a few gaps and stops and starts to go with the cuts and the action between these different flashbacks. None of this stuff was in the very first version. All these kind of chugging strings are the stuff that was added as we moved through the franchise. A little suspenseful break. And the whole time this cue is happening in the movie, there's a voiceover as the narrator's telling you, the reason I chose you to play this game, etc., etc. And we keep moving through these sections, and things keep rising in pitch, and in some cases raising the tempo so it gets faster and faster as we work our way through to a suspenseful stop. And then a kind of strange section where things get really slow and gradually speed up. If I look at my tempo list, I can see that the tempo starts this section at 137 and works its way all the way up to 146. It's not a huge tempo change, but it's gradually, every couple bars, it's going up a beat, 1 or 2 beats per minute. As all the strings keep rising in pitch, the tempo's gradually getting faster. The string part's getting more and more intense. The brass, kind of epic brass counter melody is starting off. Then live rock drums. Everything's going crazy. Our heads are about to explode. And now we're at this section of strings is what came at the very beginning of the original version of the cue. So all these other sections were inserted. So now this is sort of really a familiar part of the theme as referenced in the first movie. And we move into, it goes through its little progression. And then there's a kind of melodic nice, lovely, sad little melodic breakdown. And then this swells and builds to the final ultimate conclusion where something really, really bad happens. always ends with some sliding door to some dungeon being slammed right on that ending hit.